good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on this sunny Thursday afternoon. I hope you're all looking forward to a relaxing bank holiday Easter weekend. It seems like the weather's really come through for us all, which is great. My name's Mike Tansey, so I'm the head of sales at Chess, and with me today I have the brilliant Andy Petman, who's our senior Microsoft 365 adoption consultant. Andy and I are really excited to share our tips and tricks for effective user adoption strategies with you all today, and really help you get the best out of your 365 investment. So just before we launch into the session, tiny bits of housekeeping. So firstly, the session is being recorded, a copy of which will be made available to you all next week. Secondly, for any questions, we're saving 15 minutes at the end of the webinar, but if you do want to post your questions as you go, so you don't forget them, we've got a Q&A section at the top of the ribbon there. Please post them in the Q&A and we'll run through those at the end. And finally, we're offering a one-to-one workshop for each of the companies here today. And this is a consultant-led session and to discuss your specific user adoption requirements. So I've pasted a link into the chat for the survey, and simply tick the request follow-up box on the survey and one of the team will be in touch next week. Okay, before I hand over to Andy, I'll cover off a very quick introduction to Chess for those that haven't worked with us before. So we are one of the UK's leading independent technology service providers, and we're dedicated to making it easy for businesses to work securely anywhere, anytime. We've got a team of 280 IT professionals, and we support around 18,000 customers, turning over about 50 million annually. And we provide really a comprehensive range of services, and this falls across 6 key areas. So first, as we go down the ribbon, starting with the orange, it's Connect for all your internet, mobile, voice and data needs. Cloud for infrastructure, platform and software as a service offerings. Device for your laptop, hardware and networking needs. Digital services, this covers 365, Power Platform, AI and data services. Security for end-to-end security, and this could be from pen tests through to managed SOCs. We actually have a sister company called CyberLab who support us with that as well. And professional services, so this covers consultancy, project management, user adoption and managed services. And really our mission is to help businesses reduce costs, protect data and work better together using technologies. And we achieve this through long-term strategic partnerships based on trust and results. I believe that's why most of the customers that have registered here today, they've been with us over 15 years or more. And that's Chess in a slide. So I'd now like to hand over to Andy to kick off the webinar. Andy, over to you, please.
Hello, Mike, and thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to talk for about 40-ish minutes, hopefully, around education, training, comms, and just general user adoption. If I just move on, what we're covering, before I get into the detail, the title of the session is Getting Back to Basics. And the reason that we're covering this is because over the last 5 years I've been with Silver Sands, we've delivered a lot of different levels of adoption. And within the word adoption, I include user training plans, so longer term training other than just the tactical, practical, how to do something and get over it and get on. We talk about communications, long-term and short-term, and we talk about the use of 365 as a business tool to get better outcomes, either in the way that you work internally or externally, or that you're making more use of the product over other tools and it gives you a return on your licensing. Now, we cover a range of, and I'm not going to go into the cell of that, we cover a range of the activities that go through all of those sort of areas. But one of the things we're finding as we talk to our customers is there is a need to understand how to get started in the first place. And that's what this session is about. So while we can do some of the grander design work, this is around getting going straight away with something that gives you a tangible starting point to some training. Now, I'm from a training discipline, and there's a lot of background stages that you might expect me to cover in this, but this is more about showing you how you can get going today and also some of the risks that you might encounter by doing it, so that we go into doing something basic but quick and getting out there, but also understand that while we're doing that, we might need to make some compromises in those decisions. So what we're going to cover today is just a little bit of a recognition of where you are now. Everything I'm going to talk about today when I'm talking about experiences and scenarios are real. They're what we find with the customers without ever saying a name or a company. It's something I've come across when I've worked with them. So if I tell you something that looks outlandish, it is, and it's been a real experience. I'm not making them up just to make it sound a little bit more impactful. So where we are now, my experiences generally, and my teams when I've been part of a wider team over the last 5 years, some of the challenges that we're finding in getting training going. So for the trainers, quote unquote, and I'll cover why that's a bit of a difficult terminology when we're first starting to talk about 365. But what are the challenges for training and trainers? And then getting going. So we're going to explore a couple of techniques and thoughts about getting going, both on a practical and tactical now, to address some concerns, some issues, some complaints from your users or whatever the situation, and also how to put that in the context of a wider training program. So if I just start with where are we now, or where are you now? These, again, like I say, these are customer stories that we get many times, and most of them repeated. Might be the odd one or two that are slightly rarer, but they're still there. And just on the right-hand side, when I'm talking about this is just almost, I'm not going to refer to them very much, but they're the sort of disciplines, the roles, and the types of things we need to think about when we're delivering a proper training activity, whether it's a one-off because that's all you want and interested in, or whether it's the starting point of a longer program of work. So where are we now? Most of you, I would expect, I won't say hope, but I would expect most of you have already deployed 365, and that's partly why you're at this session, or you've been involved in planning for the deployment. Most of the companies that we work with now, there's very few onboarding onto 365 that we're dealing with. It's more about how do we get the most out of what we've got now we've got it. When we talk to customers, either I get brought in as a result of a technical requirement. So they might want to apply some technical governance or migrate some data, or they might want to turn on an application they've not turned on yet. They might talk to us at the technical level. And then while we're doing that, we'll advise them to think about the user and conduct something it's a grand title, but it's just it's a conversation with what are you doing and what's the impact to the user and how are you going to tell them about it. I do quite a lot of those engagements where it's a practical piece of training following on from something, and the customers suddenly say, we haven't even thought about that for the rest of the suite of applications or the area that we're talking about, and they'd like to talk more about how they can increase their training capabilities within the organizations so that they can start to think about it as a training program of work. And the one-off activity is a bit like a seed. What we're finding is that while the staff get training on a specific application for line of business, so they'll be taught how to buy, they'll be taught how to invoice, they'll be taught how to enter their time, or if it's a council, how to fill in and upload a photo of a pothole. And I mean it seriously, that whatever it is that we ask them to do, they should understand how to use the line of business application. 365 doesn't seem to get that same attention in a lot of the companies I talk to. So low digital skills, I mean it specifically relating to 365. And if you looked at digital skills generally as a way of getting into your 365 training, it starts to improve people's understandings of IT in other areas as well, because we do cover some concepts in here that are not just traditional tell-see-do training. I, as a trainer in my last full-time equivalent job, it was a council, and people I work with now, they don't know what the staff are doing in terms of the way that they do their job. And the way 365 works and works well is when people adapt and use the applications to the way they need to do something, as long as it's compliant with your policies or your data and information management and how you're sharing or how you're storing content or using applications. Teams can use things different ways. I've worked with one adult social care body in one council I'm working with at the moment, and each of them have subtly different ways in the way that they use some of the applications, and that's absolutely fine because they're all still following the same compliance and standards, but they can use them once they've started thinking about how they want to achieve something with either an internal or external colleague to collaborate, for example. They use them subtly different, and that's fine. I could never understand all of those scenarios, and I probably never would want to. I'd spend more time trying to document them all than I would actually doing some training. So how do I work to get them training in a way that they can adapt the applications for themselves? Again, real stories. It's not an accusation or a finger pointing exercise. This is just the truth and reality of what we're finding with a lot of organisations. There has been either little or there has been governance thought about on the initial deployment of what to turn on or off, what to allow or what not to allow, but it hasn't reacted to the compromises needed between the risk of doing something and the need for the business to do it to get the job done. And when we talk to organisations, either the governance is there and it's old and they've even forgotten why they made those decisions, or it's not there in the first place. And when we talk about what are the should and should nots, must and must nots, that can sometimes be the starting point of a conversation wider around their technical landscape. And that is a great conversation to have, because then you see the light bulbs going on about how they can make better use, because they might have turned things off without intending to, or they were too nervous about turning something on before they really understood it. And as we all know, as I tried to, sometimes understanding everything first is like boiling the ocean. For compliance, so if I talk to a group of users in my old authority and I felt I'd done probably quite a good job, I'd still find that people were still finding out how to do things. They might be using a third-party sharing product, or they might be sharing from somewhere that I didn't intend them to, but I haven't turned it off. Or they don't know what they're meant to be complying with and how the organisational policies affect 365 in the same way that they might have assessed those policies against a line of business application. One of the greatest things we're finding is that the learning by osmosis, so whether it be COVID, hybrid working, people joining the organisation with some knowledge, someone will invite you to do something and you'll do it, and then you'll learn how 365 does it if you've not had training. So we've got our first chat and we know how chat works in Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn, and we probably did it very quickly. We got invited to a meeting and probably didn't play with the toggles much in case it crashed the whole meeting. But we did learn by attending any of these meetings and any of these other applications that we use. That learning by osmosis is great because it takes the responsibility away from the central training team, but then you've lost control of knowing what people are learning and what they're using. I mentioned this at the very beginning, but this is one of the things that I think I've only had probably 2 out of a largish number of people I've worked with where they've really recognised 365 as a business tool and thought about it in terms of how it could achieve what they want to do. And it was so in a level of maturity, they were using 365 tools when they were planning their service plan for the following year, when they're working internally, when they're working externally, how they're doing their job, how they're doing the distribution of the content they want to share with people. 365 has a lot of power in it. And it can be that 365 could be a tool that replaces some of your existing stuff where you have less control over the data you're using or the activities that your staff are playing with. I hope some of those resonate. I haven't obviously tried to fill the page. There's loads more in there. But if there is anything in there, obviously stick in the chat or just react with emojis if anything of this resonates at any time during the session. I should have mentioned that at the beginning. I don't have the time to be really interactive with such a large audience, but if you do use emojis, if anything really resonates or you find it's triggering something in your thoughts. So the challenges for trainers, again, real stories. So this is the sort of things that we get involved in before I go back to the intention of the session around basics. The first thing that we'll find is that there is no official strategy. There might be a technical team that look after it, but they might not have a technical roadmap for the product. If it's not being thought of as a business tool, there'll be no real business strategy for 365. And unless there have been some connections between the data you store, the data you share, and the vulnerability of that data that's involved people like records management, data protection, or the CIRO, you probably haven't got much of a business strategy. And if you have, that's great. It helps my job when I talk to organizations, because having that understanding about how to integrate 365 with all the other tools you use, either at an IT level around service management and looking after the platform as a service, or within the business in how can we get the best of it, and how can we, if I'm a finance person, get the money back for my millions or whatever I'm spending on the licenses when I'm talking to my bigger organizations. Having a strategy jointly between IT and the business is really useful, because then the rest of that right-hand side roles area starts to really pick up some pace. Training is not an IT's job, and I've only put that in there because we're an IT company. Primarily, a lot of our initial contacts are from IT managers IT staff. They want help in configuration, they want help in delivering, they want help in developing in some way or another. And the number of people who come to us from a business role are usually quite low. So what we're finding is, and I did do this in my original authority deployment before we had the chance to do it a second time, was that we did just turn everything on. We just got IT trainers to go out and do a little bit of training, and we never thought of it as a strategic plan. And it's not really just IT's job, and usually IT have more than enough on their plate already. So it isn't really their job. However, somebody somewhere has delivered some training, and it's just getting a grip on who that might be. Your training department, you might have brought in somebody from outside, or the people who turned it on felt they had to, and they put together a small team to do some training first thing. But how do you measure that, and how do you rate that against a longer term plan, so that you've got some sort of maturity or like steps that you go through from a basic into sort of more advanced training? I mentioned this already. You do not understand your team's way of working, as in the teams that we're not members of. They do, we don't. And some of the challenges are just understanding how to design training for such a wide, dispersed use of a product. It's huge. There's 30 odd applications. This one, probably everyone can smile with irony. Microsoft deploy largely to the end user without you getting involved. There are ways to mitigate by understanding what's coming, but it's still coming. There are some changes that are gated by your IT staff, so you can evaluate their impact before you turn them on. And it's a large volume. We look at a dashboard every Monday morning, and the changes that have been deployed on what we consider to be a quiet week are still quite scary if you just look at it in the whole. How do you respond to that amount of change going out there and ensure staff know what's going on? I mentioned we've got 30 plus apps. I mean, obviously that changes regularly. I think it was 37, but it depends on your license subscriptions as well as to what you've got added into that dashboard of applications. When you think you see everything, there's probably still some more that you don't. When we're talking about such a large suite of applications, one thing that I talk to a lot of organizations about, but I won't touch on much today, is self-reliance, and how do we help people understand that there's a slight responsibility on them to look at how to find out how to use an application or service within 365. Because if they wait for me to design training for every 30 applications with every 100 and something features or sub-applications, and then to work out how to train them on the way that they need to do their job, it'll never happen. And self-reliance, self-service of training is a new-ish way of learning in the flow of work. So how can I get hands-on training when I want to know how to do something? And again, we deal with that in terms of different tools that we can deploy to the end user so they can look for something really quickly on a trusted resource that might not be ours. And then lastly, I mentioned already about compliance. I'm not going to go into that too much more. I don't want it to be too heavy, but there is the understanding that me going out, how do I get the information necessary to tell them what they can do? So whether they can do something with an application, whether we've turned all the features on or we've only launched a subset, how do we deal with that? So how do we get going on training on the basics? Now, what I'm going to cover here is a couple of things as a trainer that I would do, and then we'll focus on one of them. So the first thing that I might need to know, and this is really key if I'm going to do a training program. So I'm starting at the high level, and I'm going to come right down to practical. So what do our staff know? What do my staff know now? Now, we've got software in 365, administration tools that allow us to see what people are doing. We can look at surveys, either running them, or we can look at what's been done in the past. If you've had any surveys done that give you a flavour towards digital maturity. We have other tools that we can deploy, and I'll talk about a couple of these later on. And then also some use cases, solutions, how 365 is being used by the staff. Do you know any of that? If you do, that's brilliant, because that gives you a starting point. If you don't, and you don't have the time, budget, resources, or appetite to do that, we can cut through that. That would be the ideal and utopian. This is a bit of a fundamental. If I'm going to think about doing some training, who is going to do it? Either an IT trainer or an IT person that sort of has that skill set, learning and development. If I have a team, another. It could be that is somebody you need to bring in. It could be someone you can identify in the organization. The bigger the organisation, the more you may have people who can do some of this. As you go down towards the smaller ones, you might have somebody who's got no responsibility for training at all, and you might need to think about how you do it in a different way. But if you don't do it on 365, you end up with the issues I raised earlier, where you just don't get that training done and the people aren't doing the things either the right way or making the best use of it. Begin to think about what your baseline is. What is your starting point? There are a number of what we call, I think Microsoft called them pillars originally, but I just call them skill sets. People want to collaborate generally. People want improving productivity and efficiency, or you might want to improve compliance. There are other things that you might want to do, but I've narrowed that down into a really quick decision point. What do we want to do today and what do we want to train on?
Andy, just before we move on, I've seen a couple of hands up. I think if it's okay. Andy, did you have a question at all? You might be muted. Are you able to post the question into the Q&A, Andy? If that's okay.
Okay, was that the only one?
I think it was. And Andy, if that's okay. Yeah, if you continue, Andy Brown will look to pick up that question at the end. Thank you. Sorry, Andy, to interrupt.
Cool, that's all right. Yeah, so if we're going to start simple, what are we going to pick on? And these are the two that I'm finding are the most common, and then it might be that these two don't make sense to you at all, but something else may do. So when we are talking to organizations at the moment, one of the things that they want to do is whether it is storing safely, whether it's sharing, whether it's collaborating internally and getting better use out of OneDrive, Teams and SharePoint, or one or two or three of the applications. But the what to use and when is a really, really quick and simple one to deploy. Now, I mentioned on one of the other slides that this will still raise, and no matter how simple you go with 365, it will still raise questions of your technical landscape, what you've turned on, and what you then think as we start talking when we design this training of what you might still need to think about tweaking. So, for example, what to use and when, this is just completely theoretical. I might just say to you, right, what's your general principle for OneDrive? Personal working documents, easy. Teams, active collaborating documents, easy. SharePoint, storage, retention, and the odd collaboration. Very, very high level, and that's very, very oversimplifying some of my technical colleagues' type of working, but it gives you a bit of a flavour for what you want to achieve. Then I might ask you, so where are you going to share with your external people, and which other products allow it? And there'll be a load of questions around what to use and when. So starting simple is, in my word, what it means to the user. It's quite a simple, straightforward piece of work. 1 hour webinar, 1 hour training course, 2 hours face-to-face training, depending on the models you use. That is a really nice one to get people to understand, because once you can either store, share, collaborate, and use OneDrive, Teams and SharePoint, you've really understood most of the models and most of the features for storing, sharing and collaborating from any product that is able to store a document. As we start to design that training, you might still ask those questions, and you might end up with either you need to make some technical changes because you realize you've got some risks because of the questions that have been asked, or you might understand that you're going to make the training available because you want to get going and get people using it well now, while you still develop your technical roadmap about how you start to secure some of the vulnerabilities we discuss. So the starting simple is the end user. How do we do something for them? So the what to use and when is a great one. How to share, and I use the phrase safely and legally. So this, in other words, compliant. I just prefer the word safe and legal for some reason. But if they're sharing documents and you're sharing documents for sensitive or a nature that makes you nervous, doing something like a session on that gives you the chance to ask the questions that would otherwise never be asked. And then what makes sense for where you are. So as each of you in this audience, you might think, well, actually, we've done number one and we've actually done number two, or we're not going to do that yet because we've still got some work technically. But you might want to think about, we do a lot of meetings and we'd like to train our people who are what we call meeting managers that are running most of our meetings. And we'll show them all the bells and whistles that Teams meetings can do. And if we have a premium license, we can show them the premium features and the Copilot and any of the other capabilities that you can layer on there. But again, this is coming back to keeping it simple, starting with a feature or a scenario that you'd like to meet. Then we would come down and we would review and plan for future training. So if we deliver a baseline set of skills, that baseline can be your platform for any future training. Now, one of the things I always say here, and this is where if it hasn't realized with you, it's the same as your payroll system. It's the same as your procurement system or whatever you use as your line of business. I always try to say, without scaring people, adoption is for the lifetime of your subscription. You can do training today and then not do any tomorrow, but you will change. The features will change, and you will need to do something to help people keep up with what's going on, either with the way that your company works or the way Microsoft are driving you towards working by introducing changes to the environment or new products like Copilot and new applications that come out. And then, of course, we need to talk about applications that disappear over time. So those are all the steps we might think about doing. So we might find out what people know, and if we don't, we might be able to find out from previous exercises who's going to do it, identify what our objectives are from doing a bit of training, start simple, and review and deliver some future planning. This whole session is around starting simple. So it's about saying, okay, we know we need to do that. We have a training team that might actually expect us to do that, but we need to get going because I'm either getting complaints from my business partners in the business. If you have that role, I'm getting complaints from my users because they're saying, well, actually, I've got this stuff and I don't know how to use it. And you're going to tell us we're moving our data into it in 3 months' time, moving all our file shares over. Just examples. But it's how we work on starting simple and recognizing underneath all of this, there might still be an implication technically for you. So what next? So this really is just to say, okay, we recognize that we need to do some training. This session isn't going to go in detail into the ways and delivery. I've mentioned obviously webinars, training face-to-face, train the trainer so other people go around and train for you, enabling a champion network or a tool like a learning management system or a Microsoft Learning Pathways product that allows you to distribute communications, information and training modules. But just generally, what would I do next if I deliver some basic training? I just didn't want to leave it hanging on the end of a delivery of something. So what we might be able to do is say, okay, from that training we delivered, find out where we are. So that when we start to design some new training, we can pick real gaps in the organization where they've come back to us and said, okay, I've had some training, I really enjoyed it, I need more. I will fill in your survey, although I've had enough of surveys for the last 6 months coming out my ears. I'm joking, but that's, again, real scenarios. But people who've had training realise that there's a large gap in how they use 365 and may welcome you identifying future training needs. So they'll fill these in, I hope, around 50 to 60% on all the experiences of surveys that I run with our clients. So we can find out where they are. We can then use tools. I've just put up a dashboard there that I use using Microsoft List, but there's loads of different ways we can distribute information. That's the best low-cost one that can go around to business managers as well as IT people without needing licenses on reports and things like that. And that allows you to be able to say, okay, we've done some training. We spent 10,000, 5,000, 100,000, whatever the size of your organization. And you'll be able to say, okay, we started off X. We will have ended up with Y in terms of people feeling either confident in their use or in their understanding of the products. And you can demonstrate some value to the training so that you can get some more money for the next training round. And if you can't see the wording, but if you see movements forward, you've got areas where your training is successful. If you saw some trends that were heading downwards, you've got some training needs for the next program. So you've got some real data that you can use to model any future training needs. If you wanted to go to this level, we could also work on tools that allow you to identify how best to use 365 within the business. So identifying real outcomes for people who are looking at the way they want to work in the future, and identifying business objectives in their planning, and then identifying activities within 365 which will help them reduce the overheads on the team, the overheads on your third-party software where 365 can do it. After all, you've paid for the licenses, and just generally the efficiency within the teams. If we've got a product that's costing X for the licenses and you're putting the money investment into the training, you'd like to see the other side of it being that something's happening in the business that's getting better. So I'm just going to wrap up with a short summary. I'm just talked about where we are now. 365 has been deployed, usually as an IT project. And again, experiences suggest that it's either been deployed as a movement from an ELA to a subscription model licensing, if that means anything to you in IT. But basically, it just means that you didn't have 365 one day and you did the next, and IT and or some other people with some decision making will have just turned on a number of applications that you then had access to with or without the training. The training has been, and this is end users, or rather not end users, but clients telling me so, that they're recognizing that they've only made a training at the initial deployment as a token, usually, as I mentioned earlier, pandemic or hybrid working related. Afterthought, and sometimes it hasn't even been addressed. They just haven't done any training on any of the area. A lack of recognition of 365 as a business tool, either in terms of the way they use it, but also that nobody's thought about bidding for a budget for the year ahead or identifying people to do the work to make 365 or increase the visibility of 365 in the business. Challenges for trainer. The first one that always comes up is the number of applications and how do we deal with them. I've only got one trainer, or even organisations that have 10 trainers. You aren't going to go around and do half-day training on each product by rote. It isn't going to work for the end users. It's not going to work for the central training team. I would imagine they go into burnout after the first month or two of doing that. And also, I did a full day. This is just an example, but I did a full day training on Word before I took up some Word training responsibilities, and I did an intermediate. And I still remember now, the only thing I came away thinking, wow, that was fantastic, was treble clicking a paragraph over 2 pages to select the paragraph. Didn't even know about it before I went to it. When I came out, I forgot all about mail merge because I've never used it. Forgot all about other features like auto fields because I never used them. So was that a good use of my time? Possibly not, when there are tools or there are trainers like we can help you with that can go out and practically get people to understand how to use 365 when they need to. The pace of change in the applications and features is just too overwhelming to manage in the traditional way through a change board or through your traditional change comms. How can you get changes out there? What comms methods can you use? What tools could you use? How do you evaluate which ones you need to tell the users about? In amongst the 100 or so that came out last week, only 3 may be appropriate to train or to tell. The rest of them are either low level or technical environment changes that have no impact on the end user at all. How do you actually get into the habit of evaluating those changes? And then obviously budgets and resources, that's either for the trainers, training manager, or the functional managers responsible for looking at training. So getting going, we just talked a little bit, agree a scope, agree something that's reasonable and achievable, and something that if you can make it measurable so that you can provide return on the money you're using so you can get more the next time. That's the way I look at it. If I'm going to deliver something like this, and I know I'm in it for the long haul because it's a big product or it's a constantly changing product, I need to get something that achievable from day one that I know I can turn around and say, I did this, it made this benefit, can I have some more money? Yes, please. And I carry on chipping away at the knowledge and skills while I talk to the technicals in the background about improving any compliance or any technical landscape that I need to at the same time to improve a whole 365 experience. Everything that I talked about today in terms of getting going is keeping it simple. I can also be guilty of, if I'm training somebody on X, I'll also show them Y and Z while I'm about it. No, be clear about the scope, stay with the scope, train it, accept that it might be a limited capability to begin with, but you're creating your baseline from which you can develop any future training plans from there. If we get this right, and this is just how I work with a customer, and this is just a personal, it's not, I don't tell them this, but if I work with a customer and if we get this right, they get it and they get the principle that the users need this. It's not so much about me persuading an IT trainer or an IT manager or even a business manager. It is about getting it that the users need it. And that if the organization invested in the training on this, it could improve compliance, important. It could improve productivity, important. It could improve getting the job done for the user in a better way. So I always think of things in training in what's in it for me. And if I don't answer that question for user, I need a stick, because if I can't tell the user what's in it for me and how I can help them do something better, I need a stick. And some of those sticks are something like, we are migrating our data away from a file share. You will use them in SharePoint, Teams or OneDrive, because we have to save our licenses and the tin goes end of life tomorrow. Very easy stick, which I prefer not to use if I can, because my job is really to get users to want to, and they want to carry on working with us as we train them, as we show them capability, and as they start to embrace the fact that 365 is here to stay, and it ain't going to go away. You are not going to change 365 in the immediate future. How can we help them get the message that while it's something we're doing for them, I'd prefer to use for rather than to, it is something I'd like to bring them along with me on the journey. And that means all of my training has to have a what's in it for me when I talk to them. What's that killer? What's that USP? And a lot of the 365 features for the novices that haven't got beyond entry level understanding, there are some really great bells and whistles that they can, as a meeting manager, like a PA who runs meetings every week, once she sees or he sees some of those features that you can do in Teams pre, during and post meetings, can actually reduce quite a lot of the overhead and churn that they have to go through to get the meeting together. And. There's loads of scenarios where we can identify wins for people to make it worth their while to attend the training. And I think I'll hand back to Mike, because I think I've covered everything I hope to in there, and I hope that's sort of hit the mark and resonated a little bit with all of you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andy. So, yeah, I think lots of good nuggets in there. I really like the point around training is for the lifetime of your subscription. I've seen lots of customers do the kind of one and done mentality when it comes to training, but forgetting that it's an evergreen product. You know, the buttons move, new features, new products, new applications come into this all the time. And if you knew 365 a couple of years ago, it's a different beast today. And the other point that stood out for me is really around the pace of change being overwhelming for users. It certainly is. I mean, there's a wide variety of skills across businesses, from those that really get technology and you know, aren't overwhelmed by a button moving or a feature coming in, to those that really are. So I think just planning and giving relevant and contextual training to end users across a number of various training mediums is definitely caters for different learning styles. So yeah, really useful. Thank you, Andy. So just before we go into the Q&A, so just a reminder, we're offering a follow-up session with Andy. So this follow-up session will work with you to uncover any gaps that you have in your current training plan. We'll understand where Microsoft 365 tools can be used most effectively within your organization. And lastly, we'll identify that suitable starting point for training delivery to get you really kickstarted on that journey. So again, to book that session in, I've pasted the link into the chat. And you just tick the follow-up box in the survey and we'll be in touch. I think what I'd like to do now is just open it up to Q&A. So unfortunately, the microphones are muted on this call, but if you post any questions that you got in the Q&A section at the top of the screen, and we'll look to run through those together. You can see I'm getting a few messages. So somebody's come direct. So one of the questions, Andy, can we kickstart our training without doing the compliance and governance, or are we best to sort that out? And that's for Kat.
Ideally, compliance, then training, so that you've got a sound platform of what you're telling the people on. And by having your compliance in place, you've had conversations with the people that you get their endorsement to what you're going to tell the end users. If you have a recognition that while you need to do some training, the business is really calling out for it, and you begin, as I talked at the beginning about, asking some of those awkward questions about what I should and shouldn't, can and can't do. If you do decide that, yes, you do need to make some changes to your environment, but you're not going to make them for 6 months, or you're going to sit down and do some real detailed design work to think about that for a number of months, you may want to give the training. And that means understanding that the training will be 80% there, 70% there, just to get you started. I would always recommend you never train somebody on something you know is going to change, because you'll lose them. The moment they get something that changes the month after you've told them to do A and they get to do B in a month's time, you'll lose them. Not everybody, and I'm being very generalistic there, but you'll lose them. That's the training epithet. One of the things that I would always try to do is to understand the compromise we're making in the training documenting the risks that we're doing by allowing something we might not want to have happen in a little while time. It's better to tell them how to do it properly, and then when we do lock it down, we protect that vulnerability. Some organizations might just need to make a bit of a risk assessment and accept that risk for you to give me, as in me, to give me the coverage to go out and tell people they can do something which might not be optimum, but it's good enough for today while we're working on the bigger stuff.
Thanks, Andy. And I know I've personally done that myself. I've watched a YouTube video and seen some, oh, that's a cool feature. And then you try and do it in the environment. Actually, it's locked down for governance or security or compliance reasons. So, yeah, I guess when you're delivering that training, I guess doing one before the other makes complete sense. I had another question that's come through direct on Teams. So we've done some training pre-COVID, but not really started back up. How do we get going again?
There's a number of different elements to that one. First of all, if you want to get going quickly on something, you've got a foundation of what was delivered before, you've got some documentation, you've got some, however you dealt with it, you've got somebody with the knowledge if they've not left. If it's organisations like I worked in previous to joining Silver Sands and then now Chess, very little documentation, it was done on the fly. If you have the opportunity and you have the luxury, do a survey. I always like the survey because there's something in the system analytics that you can get which says how many emails are going instead of sharing links, how many people are using conversations, how many people are using OneDrive, how many people are using Teams and SharePoint. There's a load of different granular elements within the admin center that you can get access to as a business person if you're in the business, as a report, or the technical administration people see. That gives you a really good starting point to say, okay, what are my staff doing? But surveys give me attitude. The way I ask questions, you can find out what they know, what they do, but most importantly, what are they confident in? So the attitude. So how do they feel about the product? So can you, and then you've got a scale of 1 to 5 in terms of confidence. And the confidence bit is the bit that allows me to make a lot more contextual training for people. If I don't have the luxury of that, we need to accept that we're going to do a baseline of training, and you might invest in training 300 people in your organization. 20, 40, 60, whatever the number is, might not need it, but you've got your baseline, and there's nothing wrong with that. The redundancy in the people who might know what you're telling them already still gives people confidence that you're investing in them, even if it's to ratify they're already doing it right. And then you've got your baseline for the next time if you're allowed to repeat the exercise. I can't remember what Mike mentioned earlier. It's a phrase I've not heard of before, but it's like deliver and go. If you're in that mode, it still gives you the chance to deliver again this year. And then at least this time while you're doing it, document it. So when someone picks it up next year, they've got something, there's a foundation they can go from.
Sandy, yeah, that's great. It was one and done, but deliver and go is close. So we've got a couple of questions actually from Joanne in the Q&A. Joanne says, what are the best options for training people who you can't do one-to-one training with? That's a great question.
Yeah, it's a difficult one with 365 to do any. I would say classroom training, and I'm finding that people I'm working with who have done some online training do want to do some face-to-face, both with me and with their own training team. So it's not just trying to, again, I'm not pushing me, but they're beginning to realize that the webinar approach is the first one I would recommend, only because you can get to a large number of people really quickly and never assume that they'll watch the recording afterwards. And I don't mean that horribly about anybody. I'm busy in my day job. If I missed a meeting or I didn't quite listen in because I knew it was being recorded and I was doing some work in the background, which it can happen with webinars, we know that when we're doing training even, unless we associate exercises to it, we're gonna miss a few people. But webinars are a really good starting point. When we've done the webinars online, we then talk, if the people, and this is just if you have the luxury, if you have training teams and you have asked us to help, our first protocol would be to train the trainers so you can become as self-sufficient as you can, as quickly as you can, and you can go away and do the training, and you can do it whenever you need to, and it might not then rely on something as a relationship with someone like me. What we're finding, however, is that the people who do the trainer still don't have the level of depth of experience to be able to deal with Q&A and other things like virtual drop-ins or even physical floor walking, where people ask questions about they've done something actually more complicated than they should have done, but we still need to tell them how to get out of it. So the training One-to-one, one-to-many is what I call for the really specific scenarios where your audience really need to achieve a job outcome, and you can attach a lesson plan or a plan about a lesson. Doesn't have to be grand design, but how you're going to approach the training, how you talk about the scenario that they want to achieve. So effective meeting or running my tasks effectively, whatever your scenario is, you have a tangible outcome that they will then go away and practice so they don't forget afterwards. Because as we know, if we do something on a technical side, if we don't do it again immediately afterwards and possibly a week or two, or even after Easter and a week's break, I might have forgot what someone told me last week and not even know how to do it anymore. So yeah, making it relevant to their work is got to be the best way when you're talking about the face-to-face to make the value.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andy. Another question from Joanne as well in the Q&A. Any recommendations for good e-learning packages to use?
If you've got Microsoft licensing, and there's different nuances, but I'm just going to talk very general and high level. There are a number of tools that you can either bring in for yourself. Microsoft Learn has a lot of free Microsoft training. Microsoft Learning Pathways is a SharePoint site that you can bring into your environment and run like a 365 hub for communication and for training. That allows you, both of those tools allow you to deliver to the end user, either in Teams or in a SharePoint site, 365 training. They update it quarterly. So when Teams changes, the training changes, when SharePoint and so on. You are able to enable and disable elements where you might not have applications or features turned on, and you don't want to tease people with what they could have had if they had a different choice made at the technical enablement. So they're great tools, and the other benefits of those two is that you can add your own content. So you can add your own videos, your own user guides, desk aids, infographics, whatever, and even branding to a degree, certainly on Learning Pathways, less so on Microsoft Viva Learning. Viva Learning has some more complicated licensing implications. I won't go into that now, but if you wanted to talk to me at another point on the one-to-one session, we could explore that as a specific issue. What you can also do is use some of the free training that Microsoft provide and import that into, or not link it, not import it, link to it from within your own learning management system. So if you have a Totara or and I don't know all the products that you might be using, you can actually use the Microsoft Learning packages directly within your own LMS.
Perfect. Thank you, Andy. And I'll just tag those, Joanne, just in the Q&A, just so you've got those names written down for you as well. I've got time for a couple of questions. So I've got one more that's come in direct, and I think that's the last question. Is there any online training that we can gain access to so we don't have to reinvent the wheel? I think that's somewhat similar to what we've just had, so it might have been covered, but I guess, is there any additional training or any kind of resources that you would go potentially, Andy, as a trainer to upskill yourself, or anything maybe it's coming from that angle?
Yeah, I haven't got them to hand, and I should. I've probably got bookmarks somewhere, but I don't want to not pay attention to the screen. Microsoft have a landing page for Microsoft 365 training, and that has icons for the common applications at the top, and then a dashboard of all the other applications that they provide. That is a free resource, publicly available, no license, no nothing. You can just go and see that. One of the things about Microsoft training is it's not organizational specific. So if you have a particular nuance around your use of OneDrive, you can never change that training to meet your organization. Good and bad. But it's brilliant because they give you what I call use cases. So you normally get a getting started or an introduction to, so OneDrive, introduction, getting started, and then specific scenarios like storing, sharing, deleting, and it will give you a number of little, like a playlist for each application. They are freely available, and you can go to them now. If you have Viva Learning in any way, the basic Viva Learning where you get LinkedIn and Microsoft training for free, Microsoft have a look and feel to their icons, a very application like blue for OneDrive, greeny for SharePoint, purpley for Teams, and that is available for free. So if you have E3, you have basic and you've enabled it, you have access just by doing some searching, and you'll start to get a feel for the iconography they use. And again, we can put something out with the slide deck when it comes out to you. I think I'll look to Mike to see if he's nodding, but I don't see any reason why we just don't let you know what those are.
Yeah,
So those are free and available to use. It's only when you get to the more advanced things in Viva about recommending, playlisting, and manager tracking, where licensing gets a little bit more complicated in Viva Learning.
So I think what we'll do, Andy, we'll send a few links alongside the slide deck today. And also we'll post some links to the future webinars. So we've got a couple coming out around AI, around cost optimization, around other Microsoft tools and technologies as well. So we'll make sure we follow up with those. So I think that concludes, Andy, in terms of all the questions that are in the Q&A. So lastly, just to say thank you, Andy, for the session today, and thank you everyone for attending. We really look forward to having you on the next session. We hope you enjoyed today, and have a great Easter weekend. Thank you very much.